Yep, it's been a long week of election and talking heads and bad football, but here we are today, and we're all together, so a lot going on, but glad you guys are here today. Matthew chapter 6 is where we're going to hang out today, and we're here for the whole month. If you were here last week, it's this teaching of Jesus' most famous sermon he ever did called the Sermon on the Mount. And before we get to it, I just want to let you know about our partnership class that's coming up this Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. here in the building. And I'm going to lead that. It's a 1-hour event. I'm going to lead it, and it's where we talk about who we are as a church, what we believe the mission is that God has for us, and then specifically what part you can actually play to help see that actually be accomplished. And so if you're kind of intrigued by that, but that feels like too much of a jump for you, then let me suggest our VIP lunch, which is actually happening after this service today, so down the hallway. And that's where we just hang out with our staff. We provide lunch for you. You ask questions, you get to know us. No presentation, nothing like that. But because I'm giving you this last minute opportunity, I still need you to register, okay? So you can do that while you sit there in the app, okay? So if you use the app, go all the way to the right. There's a More tab that pops up to events. Partnership is there, and VIP lunch is there as well. Okay, let's jump in if y'all are excited about this. How many of you know that punctuation matters? Okay, punctuation matters. Yes, the teachers among us. But you say, well, what do you mean? Well, let me give you a couple of examples, okay? Well, look at these two sentences. This one says, I'm sorry I love you. And this one says, I'm sorry, I love you. Right? Those are different, aren't they? How about this one, the second one? A woman without her man is nothing. Well, that sounds one way, but how about this one? A woman, okay, without her man is nothing. You're like, yeah, that makes more sense, doesn't it? All right. How about this one? This is my favorite one. Let's eat, Grandma. Come on, dinner's ready. Or let's eat, Grandma. Okay, the punctuation makes a whole bunch of difference right there. And then I just took our series and I threw this punctuation on it. In God we trust, right? With some hesitation. There's a question mark there, some indecision. Or as a statement, right? In God we trust, okay? So it's an emphatic kind of a statement. And all we're trying to do over these few weeks in this series is how do we challenge ourselves to turn that from a question mark into an exclamation point, essentially. So last week I said none of what we're talking about could actually be understood apart from what Jesus says at the end of this section in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. I'm going to do a really, really quick review. If you missed last week, you're going to catch up very quickly. Jesus said this, but seek first the kingdom of God, okay? And that just means anywhere that what God wants done is done. And his righteousness, so what is good and just and right, and all these things, okay, so all the things that we're talking about and what he has just mentioned, all these things that we tend to worry about and stress about and prioritize as important, all these things will be provided for you. And it's Jesus just saying, okay, listen, there's a principle here that if we settle the first things first, meaning, is God really the first place in your life, then everything else tends to fall into place, okay? So that's the God guarantee. And last week we just said, hey, there's really kind of like two ways to do things with what you have. There's this way over here where we gain and we acquire and we pile and then we take all that stuff and we hope that it will be the security that we need to take care of us in our life. And Jesus said there's actually a different way to do that, and that is to lay up treasure in heaven or to support God's kingdom and what's true and just and right. And we landed on a couple of takeaways, just quickly review. Number one, my use of money reveals what I love. And that's pretty easy to figure out, right? And so if you take your time and you go, okay, how did I actually spend my time? What things did I think were valuable? You could just pull out your calendar and look at it and go, okay, well, I did that and I did that. Got it. Same way with your money, right? And if you want to know where your money went and what you thought was important, you could probably just open up your app on your bank account and go, okay, yeah, we did that. Okay, I got it. I remember, okay? The second thing was my heart will always follow my money. I mean, money is not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But we will be invested, okay, wholeheartedly in whatever we think is most important. And so the question we landed on was this: how do I lead my heart towards God's kingdom and his righteousness, right? How do I actually use what I have to expand God's kingdom and righteousness so that my heart actually follows those things, right? Today we're going to add a little bit more to it, and we're going to ask this, okay? Am I serving money as my God, okay? Or am I using money to serve the one true God? Who's excited that you came today, huh? All right, awesome. That's the spirit. Because some of us go, you know what? Well, great. I brought a friend today for the very first time. And some of you are like, awesome. It is my first time. And I knew this was going to happen. This is why I don't come to church, okay? Because we always talk about money. So let me just be clear. This is not a message or even a series about money. It's actually much worse than that, believe it or not. It's a message in the series on fully trusting God, okay? So that's what we're talking about. And the example that Jesus uses is money, okay? So maybe I'll just lay all of my cards on the table to begin with and say, listen, if you already know, okay, somebody decided like very early in the first service, if you already know this is not what you want, and you're like, I don't really care to hear this, and I probably don't agree with you, and that's okay. When you get up to go refill your coffee, or when you get up to go to the bathroom, or this has happened before, you fake receive a phone call and you're like, excuse me, I need to walk out for a second. If you do that and you go to the lobby and you just keep going, that's okay. I get it. That's fine. It's not for you today. I get it. But maybe, okay, could you just hear me out for maybe the next 25 minutes or so and see if it doesn't at least make sense to you? Okay, if what Jesus says doesn't at least make sense or sound like something you'd at least be willing to try or at least think about. And then after you do all that and you decide, okay, that's not for me, then that's okay, okay? Because this is not really, in the end, about getting you to give more of your money. At its core, what we're talking about is putting your full trust in God. All right? That's what we're doing. Jump in. Now you're very excited. Jump in where we left off last week. Jesus gives us next in verse 23 a really weird image when he says this: the eye is the lamp of the body. Now, there are figures of speech that you and I use all the time, and we're like, I don't really know where that came from, but I know exactly what it means, right? It's raining cats and dogs. You use that one all the time, right? Well, people that Jesus is talking to would have understood this one as well, and they would say, oh yeah, I've heard that one before. Jesus explains it a little bit. If your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. So if the light within you is actually darkness, how deep is that darkness? Now, don't get confused by any of this, and I don't really have time today to go into it because I have way too more important things to share with you. But Jesus is using this old Hebrew idiom, okay, that meant that someone with a good eye was considered to be a generous person, and somebody that we said had a bad eye or an evil eye was actually meant to be more like a stingy or a selfish person, okay? So he's just kind of piggyback this to what he said last week, essentially, that when we see the world through the lens of what we treasure, okay, we can only help but to serve that thing. And then he says this, right? No one, and maybe you've heard this before, even if you didn't grow up in church, no one can serve two masters, right? Since either he will hate one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to one and despise the other. Notice, Jesus doesn't say it's hard. He doesn't say it's difficult. He says you can't do it. You literally cannot do it. It is impossible for anyone to have two bosses who are telling you to do different things, right? Some of us have had this experience before. You're like, you got two managers, right? And they're both working that day, and one of them tells you to do this, one of them tells you to do that, right? You have their co-managers, right? Or you've had a boss and then somebody that thought they were the boss. That's probably more realistic, isn't it? And you're like, they feel like, it seems like they're in charge, okay? And you're like, I don't know what to do, right? How am I supposed to listen to both of you? I could do this, or I can do that, but I can't do both right now. And Jesus says, inevitably what's going to happen is you start to love one of those more than the other one. You start to love this one, and you despise that one. You are committed and loyal to this one, and you start to blow off the other one. And then you get to verse 24. Again, maybe you've heard this one where Jesus says, you cannot serve both God and money. Now, of all the things that Jesus could have picked out, right? If I would have left you a fill in the blank and say, hey, fill in the blank, you cannot serve both God and, we might say Satan, right? You can't serve God and Satan. You can't serve God and the devil. You can't serve God and evil. Jesus says you can't serve both God and money. Because here's what Jesus actually knows to be true. He knows that when it comes to believing who or what can actually take care of us in our greatest time of need, he knows that the number one competition that he has for our heart and our devotion is money. Right? The things that we own begin to own us, or the things that we grab a hold of start to grab hold of us. So it's not about having money. That's not what Jesus is saying. But rather, am I going to trust that God can actually take care of me in my greatest time of need? Or am I going to trust something else like money? So let's assume for a second, okay, actually for several minutes, that Jesus is correct. Let's just assume that what Jesus says here is okay, that's right, and it sure does make sense, okay? It produces a lot of different responses in us. Right, we hear that, and one of the responses is actually anger. We go, you know what, I don't want any part of this, and this is ridiculous, and we resist the idea that we could actually not be trusting God. And this is what causes some people to actually get really upset and think that churches just always or only talk about money. A couple of weeks back, right, at the end of our service in here, we changed this a while back, but we'll give you the opportunity to come down to one of these tables after the service, and we'll say, hey, if you want to talk to somebody about what it looks like to follow Jesus, or you're ready to take a step of baptism, or hey, you're here today and you just want somebody to pray with you, just come down here, and these people would love to do that. And a couple of weeks back, at the end of the service, somebody comes down front, and I was like, okay, great, they probably need some prayer in their life, I don't know, but they start to get a little agitated, and they're raising their voice, and they're being argumentative, and they're starting to yell at the person at the table. And I'm like, listen, these are the sweetest, kindest, most humble, servant-oriented people. So I feel like I don't know that this needs to be said. Don't do that, okay? Don't do that to those people, okay? But this happened, and it escalated and got very angry, and what they're upset about was, you people only talk about money. You just ask for us to give too much, okay? And so I can tell you two things about that whole encounter, okay? Number one, his picture has been shared with our security team, and he won't do that anymore, okay? So that's number one. Two, and this isn't being judgmental, it's just making a qualified judgment, and those are two different things, and it's perfectly fine, an informed judgment. And listen, there are things probably going on in his life. Maybe he's had some bad experiences in other places, but my acceptable, informed judgment says, I think it's okay to question whether or not that Jesus truly ever has been the number one priority in his life. I don't think that question got settled. And so for some of us, when we hear what Jesus says here, it produces anger. Some of us hear this stuff and we move to despair, okay? Like we got some credit card debt, we got some school debt, we got some consumer debt, like we're two paychecks away from like having actually nothing. And then if we're the average American, okay, we're giving about maybe 1% of anything we have to a charity like a church, which is like $700 and some. And so we hear what Jesus says here and we go, okay, I want to serve God with what I have, but I just can't. I just can't do it. And this is going to sting a little bit, but I think it's helpful, and I'm willing to share it because I love you. But I'll just talk about myself. I think most of the shortages that I've found myself in over the years are not because God wouldn't or God couldn't or God didn't, come through for us. But really, I made some bad decisions, right? I was the one who goes, okay, maybe I've overstepped my capacity and I let my heart kind of go after some different things and led it in that direction and put myself or maybe the family in a bad spot. And so what really happened was I had self-inflicted financial wounds, okay? And yet, sometimes we're tempted to complain, okay, that God wasn't taking care of us. So there's a little bit of despair. And that might move some of us, further to react with guilt and shame and go, man, I can't believe I dug that hole. I don't want to tell anybody about that. I can't believe we're in the situation where we can't actually, give to God first. And so one, you just need to know, okay, there's grace for that, and Jesus covers that and takes that away. The question is, okay, well, what needs to change going forward? So listen, I grew up in church my whole life. I've heard a ton of messages about money. I've felt guilty a lot about having debt in my life. I've delivered some of those messages. And so when we talk about debt, we're not doing that in a way that's intended to produce guilt. That's not the way Jesus does it. But it's to talk about what it might actually look like, okay, or what it might take to actually find some freedom so that you really can indeed put God first in your life. Remember, there was a time, a year ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, where your heart actually followed something and you got invested in something, and now, this is what Jesus is saying, you can only give yourself to that one thing first. Now, let me just talk to guys for a second, because I think it's okay to call us up. Like if you're a dude, right? If you're a husband, if you're a dad. When Chris and I got married, I didn't have a clue what to do with money. I've only learned a little bit more since then, but I didn't have a clue, okay? And I didn't know how it worked for me. I didn't know how it really worked against me. I just know that when I was a single guy in college and making really good money, I always had enough. Anybody else? And you're like, okay, well, if I want to do something, I do it. If I want to buy that, I buy that. If I want to go take some cash out, I'm going to go take some cash out. And then we got married, and those ideas and practices carried over into our family. And then Chris ended up having the burden of having to manage all that stuff, right? And she's way better at it than I am still to this day. But listen, if you're a dude, let me just ask you to step up a little bit. Okay, just to be the person who's going to step in there and say, okay, listen, to have some kind of leadership over your finances, even if that's to lead yourself, okay, or to lead a spouse or to lead your family, and do it in a way where maybe you're the one who has to step in and say, you know what, we're not going to do that anymore. Or to say, you know what, we're not going to do that, we're actually going to do this. Or when you go to lunch, and have the conversation about what we talked about here, and if you're ever coming back or whatever y'all talk about, you're going to be the one who says, listen, all right, we're going to do this, okay, we're going to honor God with the first of what we have. So I didn't do a great job at that. So we made some bad decisions, along the ways. And, we had a lot of medical debt because people need to do things, and so we could just never save. And it's like you just never get on top of it. And then in 2000, I was on staff with a church, and we're buying some property, and we're going to build a new building, and we're going to move from Portable into this new location. And so the whole church is going to go through this capital campaign to raise some money, okay? And so Chris and I prayed about it, and what can we do? And, we're in this situation, but what can we do? And then we said, you know what? After we say amen, let's just go look in the bank account. And would you believe that $25,000 had been deposited while we prayed? Do you believe that? I wouldn't, because it didn't happen, okay? That's not how it happened in the least bit, okay? But what did happen was we scraped, and we scraped, and we scraped, and we did extra stuff just to be able to make a very, very small commitment so that I didn't feel guilty about working at the church and nobody found out and I wasn't fired. We're going to make a really, really small commitment, okay? But what we decided to do was, and it took several years for us to get back in a better situation, and it was just one decision after another, but all along the way, what we were saying was, okay, God, we're going to continue to put you first, believing that you have promised to take care of us and that that's what's going to happen, okay? So 2022, 2 years ago here, we launched a thing called Forward, and we said, let's try to double our collective generosity to $4 million. And so we invited everybody to jump in on it, and we were in a position at that point to then make the largest commitment we've ever made in our family to anything like that before. And I was just kind of out riding my bike this week going, man, that was just thinking back over all that and how God brought us through that, realizing that the pledge that we made 2 years ago was 10 times the one we made earlier, 20 years before that. Now, I think there's extenuating circumstances for some of us that put us in a bad situation. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? I'm talking about decisions that we've maybe made in the past that we had to have something, okay? Or we had to feel something, or we actually had to possess something, and so we ran after it and we got it, and then our heart followed it, and it continues to follow it. And then someone like me comes out here and stands here and says, listen, hey, put God, first, and the way you can really test that is how generous you are. And some of us get mad. And some of us feel despair because we can't do that. And some of us, we feel guilty and some shame. I'm just asking you to understand why you feel what you might feel and why it's so hard to actually give first. Because there's another way to go, right? It's the way Jesus sets it up, and that is, okay, you can go this way and just make a commitment to actually trust God first. Right? Have I truly decided that God is going to be first place in my life, or am I at least willing to test him in it and step in it and try it? So, story in the Old Testament, I want to run it by you real quickly, and it wasn't at all what I thought we might do today, but I'm just kind of thinking about it this week, going, man, I think that really illustrates what I want to go for. 1 Kings chapter 17, there's a prophet named Elijah, and God says, hey, I have an assignment for you. I want you to go confront the evil king Ahab, and Ahab's the worst of all of Israel's kings, and he led the people into false worship and false gods and sexual depravity. And so God says, all right, listen, I want you to go deliver this message and tell him as a punishment, and then to try to get his attention, it's just not going to rain for a few years. And so Elijah delivers that message, and then God says, okay, now that you've kind of thrown that punch, you need to run because he's going to try to kill you. So you go hide somewhere. But God's promise to Elijah was, listen, I'm going to take care of you. Okay, don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of you. And so you have a few instances where God provides for Elijah. And then I want to share one other scene from that same time. 1 Kings 17, God says, okay, now it's time for you to get up, and I want you to go to Zarephath that belongs to Sidon and stay there. So look, I've commanded a woman. She's a widow, and she's going to provide for you there. So God's just saying, hey, I want you to get up from here. I want you to go over there. And the place that he sends him to, it's not a Jewish woman like Elijah is. It's not even Jewish territory like Elijah's familiar with. They don't even believe in the one true God. He says, go there, okay? So Elijah got up and he went to Zarephath. When he arrived at the city gate, there's a widow gathering wood. Elijah called to her and said, hey, would you please bring me a little water in a cup and let me drink? And as she went to get it, he called to her again. He said, and please bring me a piece of bread in your hand, okay? So if you're following, he shows up. Sure enough, there's this woman there, and she's on the outside of town, and she's picking up sticks. And he says, hey, can I get a drink of water, okay? And boil it first, okay? And then as she's walking away, and he's, hey, wait a second, one more thing. Could I also get a piece of bread, okay? And she says, as the Lord your God lives, I don't have anything, okay? I got a handful of flour in a jar. I got a little bit of oil in a jug. And now, okay, I'm out here gathering sticks because I'm going to go prepare a meal for myself and my son so we can eat it, and then we're going to die, okay? So she's like, listen, I don't know if you looked around or not, but we have a drought going on here as well. I only have enough to actually make one last meal, and it's for me and my son. There's nothing left after that, and then we're going to starve, okay? So Elijah says to her, don't be afraid. Go do the thing I'm asking you to do, but first, could you just make me a small loaf from it and bring it out to me? So Elijah, he doesn't give up on this idea. Hey, don't worry. Can you just make me a cake first, all right? And afterward, maybe make a little something for yourself and your son. Hey, you know, with what's left, just make a little something for yourself. And you're like, he just seems like a jerk, doesn't he? For this is what the Lord God of Israel says. Okay, so here comes the promise from God. The flour jar will not become empty. The oil jug will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the surface of the land. In other words, listen, if you just take the little bit that you have left and you obey God with the last of it, okay, here's God's promise. You're not going to run out of what you need. So she proceeds to do according to the word of Elijah. And then the woman, Elijah, her household ate for many days. Okay, the flour jar did not become empty. The oil jug did not run dry. According to the word of the Lord, he had spoken through Elijah. Okay, quick quiz time. Feel free to answer out loud. Did the promise make sense? No, okay. Did she understand how it works? Probably not, right? When did she actually know that she could trust God? After she poured out the very last bit. See, she only realizes God's promise and blessing and provision on the backside of giving what she had. In other words, the way the New Testament talks about it is that she actually had to sow something before she was ever going to be able to reap anything. And I'm reading this and I'm going, well, why didn't God just send Elijah to some wealthy landowner or a businessman who has more than enough for everybody and he's not going to miss any of it? And I decided because Elijah's not really the main character at this point in the story. God wasn't really trying to take care of Elijah. He's already been proving that he was going to do that. As much as he was promising, and what he wanted to do was to bless the widow, right? What he wants to do in her life. See, a short time later, when you read the story, the boy dies, right? Got a terminal disease, and then she's now going to be calling on God. I'm going to ask for God's help, and then I'm going to have Elijah come in and help out. And Elijah comes in. He actually brings the boy back to life. And see, God's been doing stuff in this woman's life long before Elijah ever showed up, right? I believe that God knows she's down to her last meal. I believe that God probably knows her son's going to die. I think God knows she's feeling hopeless in her life. And God decided, I'm going to bless her. And the path to that blessing was faith. Right? Her pouring out what little she had when it didn't make sense and she'd never seen anything like this happen before. You read the rest of the story and she's living under God's blessing. The boy is brought back to life, right? They have more than enough and what they need, and she's living life with God first. Listen, the point here is not that God needs your money. The point here is not that the church needs your money. It's not even really about money, as I've been trying to tell you. The point is that you need God's blessing in your life. And for some reason, the path to God's blessing begins or it stalls with generosity. Right? It's trusting that actually leads to blessing. The pathway to actually receiving starts with releasing. Now, I'm just going to take a short break, and I want you to hear from some other people tell their story of how they've worked through all of these kinds of concepts as well. Check out this story.
Hi, I'm Dave Kolb, and this is my wife, Christy, and we actually took Financial Peace twice, once back in 2017 and then again in 2022 to go ahead and have a refresher course.
So in 2017, we took Financial Peace for the first time, and we were able to complete baby step 1, which is save $1,000, and then Irma hit. And we finally had enough money in an emergency fund to be able to, really having time off work and things like that, we were able to make it through the hurricane. And that's really what lit the fuse for us wanting to, continue with Financial Peace. Baby step 2, I believe, is to pay off all of your debt that you have, like revolving credit cards and loans on things, not the house. And so we were able to use the debt snowball and really just combine all of our payments that we were able to, and we were able to pay off over $75,000 in debt between 2017 and 2022. During that time was when Forward was launched here, and that's when we really started tithing in 2022. And we've just seen God show up and work so much in our lives where we've had excess when we weren't expecting to have it, and at the exact right moment that someone around us, someone in our small group or someone in our family needed some help, and we were able to really help them out with the excess on top of being able to tithe and all of the things that we were already doing with the paying off debt. So with Dave being in the Navy, he's a mechanic, and he's had carpal tunnel for quite a few years. And doing Financial Peace University and putting all of the baby steps in place, continuing to the 3 to 6 month emergency fund and savings, we have been able to set aside enough money that he actually went out on short-term disability at the end of September. Even though he hasn't started getting paid for short-term disability yet, because it's a process and it takes some time, like they're saying, we are set, we're good. We have enough in our excess that we're covered with all of our needs, with some of our wants, and then even with Christmas coming up, like we're comfortable where we're at, and we're gonna be able to, just push through until he goes back to work at the beginning of December, and we'll be right on track with where we should be.
Some of the things that we were able to get past was, when we were newly married, we financed pots and pans, and we had a timeshare, and we were not the smartest of people with our funds, but going through this and paying off the things that we had, and just learning the principles behind it really allowed us to have a different outlook on the money, and being able to snowball everything together to get rid of our debt and be able to tithe and help people and just have a more happy lifestyle, not worrying about money. It's really been a blessing.
We would not be where we're at today in our faith and in our finances if it wasn't for Financial Peace. If we could say one thing about Financial Peace, it's just start with one step. just start with one step and see how much it'll change your life, because it's changed ours in immeasurable ways.
And knowing that finance is one of the biggest reasons for arguments in a household, this has definitely given us a happier household.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A couple of things from their story. One, they mentioned several times something called Financial Peace, which is a small group. And if you're like, man, I would love to know some of the things that they know or be able to do what they did, I want you just to tuck that away, because we'll offer that in January. So first of the year, you'll start hearing about that. That might be something you want to jump in on. The other thing I love that they talk about is how they were able to kind of get their whole financial piece figured out. And it happened when they started to really trust God with everything that they had been given. And then they got to not only receive the personal blessing, but they started to actually put things towards God's kingdom and his righteousness. So I love that. Now, y'all are sitting here, you've been sitting here the last few minutes or so. I know what some of y'all are thinking, because I sat there before, okay? And it goes like this: I'm not sure we can do that. Or, okay, you want us to give more money to the church, whatever, just say that. Or, you don't know my story. Okay, you're right, I don't know the story. But here's what I do know. Let me take you the long way around, okay? I'm about ready to have a birthday. All right? Yeah, comes around quite regularly. I'm about to have a birthday in another week, Sunday the 17th to be exact, okay? So, you could get me a gift or a card, but I don't know that I'll be here, so... By the way, if you ever feel like you just want to give me a card, just give me the $5. I'd be happy with that, okay? So I say that every year. Nobody listens to me, okay? But anyway, it's been a busy few months for us, probably 4 or 5 to be exact, and we've been through some things here around the church and, personal things, and we got some more of that in front of us. And so, we got these 2 grandkids we've talked about before, and we haven't been able to see them in a while. And so trying to figure out, can I go see them really quickly and then get back here? Because Sundays, that's my birthday. And then Monday, we're going to take off, Chris and I, and we're going to take a week away, okay? Far away from here where you can't find me. So that'll be fun. The point of all that is I'm about to have a birthday, and every year the number just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Anybody else? And you're like, man, that escalated quickly, if we could say it that way, okay? And the time that I probably have left as lead pastor, okay, at least maybe in this particular situation here, it gets smaller and smaller at the same time, okay? So that's not to say that I have a plan or anything like that. That's just math, okay? You understand it, okay? I'm getting older, my time's getting smaller. And so as that gets closer and closer, okay, and I see like how much time there might be and the money we have to work with and the opportunities are right there in front of us, like all that stuff just becomes so crucial to me. And so, again, maybe it's just getting older, maybe it's like seeing how much time you have left, but I have a few things for me that are just crystallizing, if you know what I mean. Like they're just becoming so much more clear to me, and they're finding their way into my heart a little bit more to go, okay, listen, there are some things that I want to give the very best of what I have left to see them happen, okay? And so those are dreams, those are resolves, those are things, maybe God's kind of placed in my heart. And so, listen, to give you an example, I can put in a sentence, like I've done this exercise, exactly what I think is still the calling on my life, okay? So when I say crystallize, that's what I'm talking about. And one of the things is, and you can choose to believe me or not, I had a few people say, I don't believe you, and that's fine. That's up to you. I don't really care if our church gets a whole lot bigger if it actually comes at the expense of making sure that Jesus is priority number 1 for us. And that I'm always calling you and challenging you to give everything you can in your life to trust in Jesus. And so I just want to give you a couple of these things that are crystal clear for me. And so one of them is that as long as they let me make some decisions around here, that we will continue to be a place where genuine seekers are welcome. Right? Hey, if you don't know church and you've never been to church and you're like, man, I'd love to try to figure that out, then you're welcome here, right? And so a place for people who, right, you're beginners. You're just learning. I just want to step into it. I just want to try to figure this out. I want to take a first step. Listen, I think this is a great place to do that. You're welcome here. I'm glad that you're here. Awesome. But it's probably going to get a little uncomfortable for others of us, okay? And so let me just step into it today. And I don't have a better term for it, and I don't mean anything poorly by it. It's just, I think it's going to get a little bit more uncomfortable for those of us who might just kind of be more like consumers. So what I'm talking about is trying to primarily call us up, okay, those of us who need to put a little bit of skin in the game, if I could say it that way. In other words, we're not really fully serving God with the time that we have or, our money or anything in a way that prioritizes God's kingdom and His righteousness. Now, listen, that doesn't mean that you're not a Christian. That's not what we're talking about. It's just that there are, again, I say it nicely as I can. I'm calling us up to something more. It's just that there's plenty other churches to sit in. Okay, and I don't know that what they're doing. I don't know what they're asking of people to do. I don't need to know that. I don't pastor that church. I know what we're going to do because of all this, okay? We're going to ramp up. We're going to turn up the temperature a little bit even more on things where I'm going to unapologetically ask you to serve. Okay, I'm going to unapologetically ask you to give and to invite, right? And to constantly challenge us to reorganize our lives around trusting God with absolutely everything. Not to build my kingdom, not to build this kingdom, right? Not to hit a number of people around here or anything like that. But listen, because as long as there are, I need you to grasp this because this is the reality, tens of thousands of people in our little community who do not have a life-giving church or they're not connected in a life-giving relationship with Jesus, we have work to do, and it's going to take all of us to do that. And listen, everybody else asks me for something. They ask it of you too, right? Last month, when I'm checking out somewhere and they say, hey, would you like to make a donation to breast cancer research? Okay. Yeah, I'll do that because that research is important to the people I love. Would you like to support the firemen or the sheriff? Okay, I want the extra protection that comes with that sticker on my car. I'll do that, okay? You want to give to this candidate? Do you want to, support the wetlands or global warming? And the pitch is always the same. Listen, if you get involved in this cause, the world will be a better place. Yes, listen, the church is funded by you. Okay, no secret. Big surprise. It doesn't run on love or prayers or magic. Jesus does, whatever. But the followers of Jesus, okay, who have prioritized His kingdom first and are convinced that He is who He said He was, He did what He said He did, and anyone who will trust in Him could actually have a full life. And we believe it so much that we're willingly rearranging our time and our treasure to see that more and more people can receive what we've received, okay? That's how it works. One question, we'll sing, we'll get out of here. How would you describe your view of money? That's the question. How would you describe your view of money? And we're all going to take a next step here, hopefully today. I'll give you three. One is, okay, it's false security. And you would probably never use that term or that phrase if that's you, but you're counting on something other than trust in God to actually take care of you, okay? And there's not a lot to actually say about it other than, listen, you already know that doesn't work. Like you already know it from experience, right? Like you don't even have to believe in Jesus or believe what He said to know that. The issue here, okay, that we got to wrestle with, the issue here is not that we are unwilling to see that money is inadequate to take care of us in our deepest moments of need. No, the issue is rather that we're not yet willing to believe that God can take care of us better than anything else. So maybe you just own it today and go, oh, I'm trusting something else. I'm willing to say it. But here's the next step for you, okay? The next step for you, if that's your situation, is a really, really big one, okay? And it's not for you to give money. The next step for you is to give the leadership of your life to Jesus first. Now, you have to settle that one first, right? Because until you settle that, okay, He is who He said He was. He did the things He said He could do. He can actually connect you into a relationship with God the Father. He has offered grace and mercy and forgiveness, and He offers to lead us into the very best life possible. Until you settle that, and then once you actually settle that, your view of money and generosity will follow, just like everything else in your life. So that's one. The other is fearful. Okay, my view of all that is I'm fearful because I don't know if we can do that right now or anything that you're talking about right now. We don't have extra right now. And, maybe I'm working on a thing over here and, I'm starting something, and then when I get it rolling, I can do something when we have a little bit more, okay? Listen, I don't think we're selfish people. That's not what I'm saying. But I think we just look at what we have and what we want to do, and it just doesn't make sense to us, okay? And I get that. But the principle we're learning here is that the statement, okay, that God truly is first is proven, okay, this is what Jesus says, that God really is first. It's proven when we actually give first. And I fully believe that God can get you out of whatever maybe you got yourself into faster than you can without him, okay? So that's a step. The step for those of you who are fearful is not complicated, okay? It might be difficult, but it's not complicated, and here it is. Just try it. That's it, just try it, right? Give something, even if it doesn't make complete sense to you in this moment, right? Just test God's promise and see if he doesn't do what he said and take care of you and what you need, okay? And then the last group, we would call faithful, right? Hey, I made a decision at some point in my life to actually put God first, and I've been trusting him with what I have, and maybe you've been given for a short amount of time, and some of us have been given for decades, and now you've got some history to look back on where God's actually, he's proved himself to be faithful. Here's the challenge for those of us who go, hey, I'm a faithful giver, is it can be easy for some of us to actually become comfortable after giving so long. Right? Meaning we've just kind of become so adjusted to a change in a lifestyle that we're no longer really actually living by faith. Right? We're coasting essentially in generosity. Like we adjusted our life around a new way of relating to money that we're not really trusting God anymore. So here's the next step for you if that's your situation. And that is, okay, can you just increase it? I mean, could you give 1% more? Is it 3? Is it 5? Is it 10? I don't know what that is. Those are the next steps, all right? Let's end here. It's an all play. Thought a lot about this sentence. I think it's true. I'll share it with you. Trusting God does not always lead to giving, okay? But giving will always lead you to trusting, okay? Trusting God as the starting point is not the pathway to lead you to giving. Giving is actually the pathway to lead you to trusting. Right? You don't likely learn to trust God and then give, but rather we learn to trust God because we're giving, right? So trusting does not lead to giving as much as giving leads to trusting. Again, I said it's not really a giving series or a money series. It really is a trust series. Because when we're willing to take a step and trust God with our money, that one particular area and what we have, why would we then not trust him with everything else we have? Okay? It's a high calling, big challenge, and I don't know how you're going to respond to that today, right? I mean, God's spoken to you today. Maybe he will in this prayer, in this song. There'll be a way for you to respond today. I don't know what that next step looks like, but I'm going to pray for you to take it today. God, we pray over these things today. God, for the words that you've given to us. God, the high challenge that is before us. I know it's uncomfortable sometimes, God, or we have some resistance to talking about money, but God, I really do want us today to take a step towards you in trust. And I think some of us maybe came in here today and we got other things on our heart and our mind as well. You're like, man, I needed something different today, but maybe let the money part go and just focus on the trust. Hey, God, will you be able, can you take care of what I need in my greatest time today? I believe he can do that. So God, today we just want to very simply say that we want to take a step in your direction today to declare that we do indeed trust you. And we're going to pray these things in your name today. Amen.